So, a little bit more about my story idea, Gang of Daggers. In particular, I was inspired because I've been watching the background they've been doing for True Blood, and in particular, they were discussing the other, how that's what a lot of vampire stories are. It's just this exploration of how you have society and then you have the other, the person who's outside of society, and how does this person or how does this other interact and reflect what's going on in society. I like that, and that's kind of what I was doing with my story. I mean, because really, what got me onto it was like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and how what is the story behind that? A high school student who discovers that she has this destiny, and she, basically is battling the forces of evil, and of course the one problem is that for a TV show, the force of evil, the challenge, the opposition is going to have to always ramp up and increase and increase. Um, so you're going to get bigger and bigger, enemies to battle and fight. And that got to the point where it came to a head. There was actually an obstacle in terms of presenting the information to the audience because uh, the students, had to take up arms and fight on the school grounds, and that was just shocking. It was like, oh wait, what? We can't exactly have that. And to me, that's, well, why not? What's wrong with that? What's the problem with that? You have, violence every day in schools, and to varying degrees. And in this case, it was a fantasy environment. So why was there an issue? Why would it be an issue that people could not separate um, the fantasy from the reality? And so uh, what I was, thinking of, and I just was realizing now, is that um, the the other is not somebody outside of the protagonist. The other is created. The other is essentially the protagonist and his buddies. The people that end up forming the gang, and they become something other. They become something different because of how they're able to interact with two environments, two worlds, two cultures. And something else is that, and this one person who commented on one of my stories, he mentioned that, yeah, there's so much fantasy nowadays that it's Tolkien derivative, and yeah, that's, the problem is that you get these stories that like, oh, we're gonna have an elf, a dwarf, a dragon, magic fireballs, this and that. And I was thinking that, what if didn't quite have that? You had something a bit more historical, and historical in the sense that realistic. That uh, when you watch the TV show Rome, you really do get the sense that, okay, this is the world that exists, and in particular, this is a world where there's all sorts of people of all sorts of different backgrounds, and uh, you know, sort of slants on what they can do and where they can go. And but the big part of that was just how much violence, how much um, just violent behavior was visited upon just regular people. So to the point where even the teenage daughter is raped, and um, the guy's children are sold off into slavery. The To me, it's a rougher story, and it's something that can be hard to grasp and to swallow by a larger audience. But really, that is a more realistic take on how things would happen, and I kind of wanted to explore that with my own story. Um, so the uh, the group of kids, these teenagers, they um, because they realize they have something special, because they realize that they can interact in these two worlds, and the juxtaposition of how in one world they're expected to be subservient and to just follow orders and to exist in a certain role that's expected of them. And that same thing happens in the foreign world, the fantasy world, but in that what's expected of them is to behave more like men, and to behave more like violent men, in particular because that's the sort of life that they are deciding and choosing to pursue. Whereas on Earth, if they decide to not follow the rules, then they're immediately ostracized from society. And so in the other world, the people who don't follow the rules, or people who don't want to basically be part of an establishment, they're just completely driven out and pushed to the point where they are driven to just extreme depths of banditry and trying to rob and steal and kill people just to survive. Um, and so it's an interesting aspect in that these teenagers end up having to they act as a law unto themselves in this lawless place. And in the other world, the law is essentially everywhere. The law exists in the form of the authority that the parents have over them, school teachers have over them, the police officers roaming around, and even to the idea of property ownership. Um, so that's just like different things which I try to explore. The watching C-SPAN and seeing how these different authors would describe their books, and in particular how they were exploring the people they studied, and that's kind of what I was trying to aim for with myself. And this story was, you know, this is an environment that these guys can just walk into and exist in. So how do I document? How do I document how they would react to the different, the different stimuli, the different um, like actions and people, and what's available to them. So I was hoping just to capture that and to explain and explore just those different aspects, and that's why it's kind of a bit more of a slower start, because I am laying the groundwork, but I got to be right, got to change it around. Um, but yeah, that the idea of the other, the idea that use that person to explain uh, what people think, what people feel, how they're going to try to get what they want. So yeah, stuff like that.